So let's talk a little bit about open source. Okay.
Sure.
Uh, I would say in a succinct way, what are the benefits to the community of having Databricks open source, the Unity catalog, Spark, and all the other fun random stuff? What would you say are some of the benefits to the community? And on the flip side too, what are the benefits to organizations like Databricks from the community being involved in with that too?
Oh, okay. So, all right, I'll start pie in the sky and then I'll go to exact details. Okay. So, for starters, the whole reason Databricks pretty much open sourced our technologies, right? Starting from Apache Spark and then to Delta Lake, MLflow, Unity Catalog most recently, right? The whole reason, it, candidly, it starts off with a culture that wants to do these things. It has to start with that. Right? I mean, anybody that has looked at the history of Databricks knows that the founders of Databricks, the company, were helped basically were the ones who helped create what now is known as Apache Spark, right? And so if I go back to the Apache Spark days, now I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into this, right? Like, for example, I am an example of why I feel the community is so important, right? So when Apache Spark started, right, Matei and the rest of the crew were still doing their PhDs in Berkeley, okay? And so they were still part of the AMP lab. And where was I? I was a guy who was part of the Microsoft SQL Server. Not at that time, notoriously not open source. Okay. Um, we still had Steve Ballmer in charge. Okay. So we were. I was part of also the analysis services team. So I was part of the SQL Server and also the analysis services team. So in other words, loving BI, loving building transactional databases, loving building warehouses.
So you understand
Right.
the mechanics behind Power BI too very well then.
Unfortunately, yes. Or fortunately, depending on how you want to put it. But that's a whole other story. So let's stick to the current one we have, right? And so I was actually on the team was called Project Isotope, where we brought Hadoop into Windows. Okay, so pretty controversial at the time, right? What's now known as HD Insight. The reason I bring that up, and also why attracted me to Spark. First of all, what attracted me to Spark, of course, was that it's cool, right? Especially back in 2011, 2012. Okay, so it's like, oh, this is really cool. But the real story behind this is I still remembered where I had helped Dave Mariani, this is over at Yahoo at the time, build what was at the time, back in 2011, the largest analysis services cube on the planet. Okay, the cube itself was 24 terabytes. The source of that cube was 2,000 node. I want to say 2 petabytes, but I probably got the numbers wrong. 2 petabyte cluster, right? So at that time, that's huge, right? And so this cube is gigantic, 24 terabytes, right? So for us to process a quarter's worth of data took us like 3 days. Okay, so it's just it's just insanity. But the reason I'm bringing that story up is because that's, of course, I was working quite closely with the Apache Hadoop folks because Apache Hadoop had come from from Yahoo, which then turned into the two companies of Hortonworks and Cloudera. The reason I bring that up is because I was able to join not just because of my association with Yahoo, but because of open source. So even though I'm a SQL Server guy, I'm like from the evil Microsoft at the time, right? Obviously, I don't think they're evil, by the way, just in case this gets cut the wrong way. Okay, but I'm just saying. Okay, I'm being very sarcastic. Okay.
I'll kind of be like, look what Denny Lee from said about
Right.
Microsoft.
Exactly. It was a very open, welcoming community, right? And so that changed my perceptions a lot. I'm like, oh my goodness. Okay, so even though quote unquote I'm from Microsoft, right? They were open, they were helpful. Then encouraged me to be helpful, right? And then I started going to Spark, and the reason I got into Spark was because it was really funny. After we built that gigantic cube, literally we're going, we don't want to do this again. This is huge. This is too painful. And separately, the Yahoo folks and myself, we end up just going down a different route, which ended up being the same route. both going to Spark because we were recognizing, hey, let's not move all the data to the compute. Let's move the compute to the data. And then we recognized Spark was actually the better solution. So it was really funny. For 6 months, my weekly meetings with Yahoo turned into just talking about Spark. And then I realized afterwards, hey, I haven't talked about a single Microsoft technology for 6 months. This is actually a bit weird now. Now
That's kind of funny.
All right. But the reason I'm giving this backdrop is because in the end, I loved working with the community. I had people like Monica, Armburst, Matei, Patrick teach me, because it's not like I knew this stuff really well, right? Come on, I'm from Microsoft. Why would I know that? I wrote stuff in C# VB, and there all of a sudden I'm supposed to write stuff in Scala. You know, Holden was helping with the Python stuff, so I started learning Python, right? So it was a very welcoming community, which wanted me to learn. And so in turn, I wanted to learn and give back too. And that is the heart of what I'm talking about when it comes to why it's so important for community, because it's not like they did anything specific to convert me. It's just that they were welcoming, so then I became one of them, right? And as you can tell, my excitability is still here after all these years, right? It's been a decade plus, and I'm still super excited talking about this stuff, because that's how I look at why community is so important. And this is why Databricks does it. Sure, we have our own ideas of how we should build things. Duh, we all do. But the community does too. And people seem to always forget that the diversity is actually what's important. It's actually the diversity of thought, to think about things in a different way, to get different ideas. Even simple things like, why did you do it this way? Because I normally do it this way. And then you recognize, wait, I don't know why I did that. And you start re-examining why you did things after you've accepted things for so long. Like the running joke I have with a bunch of the initial Spark PM, like the current Spark PMCs, is like, do we even remember why Spark has 200 partitions when we do a join? And at this point, we're going back and looking at the code base. We can't figure it out either. None of us remember.
Refactor.
Yeah, no, exactly. None of us remember why we did this. We're like, dude, this doesn't make sense. Why did we do this? Right. But that's the whole point, right?
My internal running joke with anything I code is, after 1 month of building something, I don't want to look back at my code because I'm ashamed of whatever I will look back at and be like, I personally could not do that, to be honest. That's maybe why I don't contribute to the open source community, because I cannot look at my own code from 1 month ago. So,
dude, I assure you, I go back and look at some of my older code, and I'm going, what in God's name was I thinking? Okay, like, don't get me wrong. But that vulnerability is actually also important within the open source community. Like, as in, no, we're going to screw up. It's okay. It's like, some people look at open source as like a competitive advantage, and I'm not actually disputing that statement. It actually can be. So let's not bother with the pretense, right? Yeah. But what I mean is that because they think it's a competitive advantage, they want to look down at people or trash people or fight with people. And I'm going, no, that's not at all the purpose of open source. The purpose of open source is that, look, we actually all know each other one from another. We're all geeks, right? So if we're all geeks and we're all working with each other, sure, sometimes we're going to compete. But who's to say in 5 years from now, we're actually not working for the same company or working on the same project together? So no, sure, a healthy competition, absolutely, 100%. It's actually a good thing to have it. Like, no joke, like, because it drives people, makes people work harder, faster. Do think of cool ideas, because you've got somebody who's like, oh man, they built this. Oh no, we got to figure it out. So no, that's fair, and we should do that. But the reality is, even after saying that, so many of these people that like I've quote unquote competed with, we're working together. Whether they're part of the company or they're partners or vendors, or even if we're still technically competing against each other, we end up working together, because in the end, there's a sizable chunk of the technology or the base tech that we're working on that we actually need to share. Because we are actually recognizing this is just a good idea, period. Right? And so ultimately, what it comes down to is that we're getting a diverse set of ideas sent back to us as Databricks the company. Databricks the company is sending out its ideas. We compare, we compete, we work together, we compete against each other. It's all the same thing. because it's actually improving all of us. And then what ends up happening is that we end up creating something better. That's it. It's really down to that simple concept. And then because we create something better, we as individuals who have worked on the project become better. We improve our own personal career prospects, right? In the past, it's always been like, especially when I was growing up, you must write down this really good resume, okay? Like an actual paper resume they hand people. It tells you how old I am, okay? Right now, especially in tech, what is it? It's your GitHub repo and your LinkedIn. That's it, right? So what is your LinkedIn? It's got to have references to really good companies or really good projects or both, right? What is your GitHub? Your GitHub actually has a ton of really cool projects where you're doing contributions, right?
Yeah.
So the more you're contributing, the more we're helping, literally equals the more you're helping us, the more we're contributing, which improves your own personal prospects because you've basically built up your own portfolio.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why I feel so crucial for people to understand that context.